I was thrust into this, so I'm going to hand over immediately to the next resource person so that we are able to meet time and allow for some form of discussion. Otherwise, we'll lose that out.
Good day. Good day, everyone. I also wish to abide by the protocol established by previous speakers, acknowledge the program director, esteemed council members, academics who are present here, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all. My name is Tozama April Maduma. I'm senior curator at the National Heritage and Cultural Studies Center of the University of Fort Hare. My background is history. I'm a historian, but now venturing into heritage preservation. So I want to start off by expressing my sincere gratitude to the hosts, NaLHISA, and the UJ partnership for putting together the program for today. It is a great pleasure and an honor for me to participate in this exercise, which I view as a very important intervention of sharing a vision for a better society and a better world. Preserving the heritage of the liberation struggle strengthens the ties that bind the visions, the action of our forebears, who very early in their lives saw the need and the importance of developing shared human values, values of humanity that we live by today. And it is hoped that NaLHISA would indeed contribute towards advancing those values. And these, as Mambete had alluded earlier on, are identified in the 7 values of NaLHISA, which have now been put together and encapsulated in the theme for the symposium, which is Critical Reflections Connecting the Past to the Future. But before getting ahead of myself, Chair, if you allow me, I wish to preface my input with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer goes that I am attending this symposium by default. The person who was supposed to be here, Professor Wochela, could not attend due to similar engagements that as the institution is busy preparing for submission to a World Heritage Register, he is now busy preparing for a report that there will be an oversight from a UNESCO delegation that's going to come to view the state of readiness of our institution to once again make a significant input in as far as putting the African continents on a world map, that of entering. We hope that the institution will be found ready for entry in a World Heritage Register. So I just want to convey a message of support from the university and Professor Wochela in particular, who unfortunately could not be here. And he has asked me to represent him here. So that's my disclaimer. I wasn't really ready to come, but I had to oblige. A bit about NaHEX, the institution that I am based in. It was initially established in 1980 as a center dedicated to the study of African languages. And it has since evolved into a cultural studies center in the 90s, which was also reflective of a cultural turn which had swept the academy in those years, wherein people were busy reflecting on the imperatives of preserving and reflecting on cultures that were previously marginalized and never incorporated into curriculum. So in those years, Fort Hare had played a significant role in the transformation of the curriculum in as far as reflecting on cultural studies with a bias on African philosophies, a bias on African values. The third evolution of NaHEX evolved in the mid-90s, wherein debates about debating the national heritage of South Africa. At that time, debates centered around changing the cultural and heritage landscape of South Africa. So we have evolved in these waves to seek to find meaningful ways of impacting and also changing the knowledge production in as far as history, culture, and heritage is concerned. So I am very much happy that conversations today land in the debates of, in the sphere of heritage and culture, which is what we do at NaHEX. And our mandate is to create an enabling environment for promoting the use and management of heritage resources. And then there, the problem starts. How do we define the liberation heritage? For me, the task for NaLHISA, if I was trying to think about the objectives of NaLHISA in relation to what is already there. Professor Maluka made mention of us seeking to guard against duplication. But I want to add another caveat to the debate to say, even though one remains cautious of duplication, there is no way that NaLHISA, if it is an intervention in the now, it has a crucial role to play. There is no scope for NaLHISA to duplicate what is already said. For already we see in our conversations, in the work that we do in these cultural heritage centers, the need for more work to be done. So in that regard, in collaboration with initiatives such as these, we will be able to arrive at a point where we have a complete audit of our heritage resources that would help us get a grasp of how far we have gone in as far as preserving the records, preserving the values, the cultures, the thought processes of our forebears. So in that regard, I think just as a way of opening into the debate, there is scope for a fresh and a crisp articulation of the idea of liberation heritage, which the Institute, NaLHISA, stands to best express that idea more forcefully. Now, in my preparation for this talk, I thought I should start off by reflecting on the benefits of initiatives that have set out to carve a path to seek to preserve an aspect of the past. Mam Bete made mention of the Liberation Archives at Forte and what that archive has done. I think briefly just to share a bit with colleagues how far the Liberation Heritage Archive have assisted in deepening scholarship on issues of liberation histories. Of course, this is a continuous process. It's still continuing. But we have seen over the years Liberation Archives becoming a valuable contribution to developing research communities, both locally and internationally. The records have catapulted the careers of a generation of researchers and heritage practitioners who are now archivists, curators, managers, and directors of heritage centers. A colleague of mine who could not be here, Dr. Boy, would attest to that. It is through the work of preserving and looking after these records that some of our generation were able to get their careers off ground. So there's an important intervention in as far as cultivating a generation of researchers that these archives have been able to assist with. So it's thanks to the commitment and the undertaking by the various political formations who took a resolute decision to donate and preserve those records under the University of Forte, and we appreciate, our appreciation is demonstrated in the number of student researchers and academics who have kind of emerged from that exercise. And not only that, in as far as changing the texture and the focus of our historical debates, one of the national key kind of interventions that the National Heritage Center has done with the generous endowment from the liberation movements is to inform the initial work of the South African Democracy Education Trust, which also catapulted my own career. That's where I started my career as a research in that project that sought to deepen scholarship on the history of South Africa's liberation struggle. Of course, it didn't end there. There are new areas of scholarly inquiry that are beginning to develop. As we speak, the University of Fort Hare is embarking on a complete overhaul of offerings in the humanities section, wherein we're developing a program in liberation studies. So there has been a serious intervention that the availability of liberation archives at Fort Hare has been able to make inroads in informing the kind of scholarship we want. We're not where we want to be, but there is a significant shift in as far as the direction that the scholarship in the humanities and social sciences is taking. And I see NaLHISA as an important intervention in that regard as well. But coming to the session for today, what I've been asked to do, I went through the program, and in my analysis of the program, there were two areas of the program that I thought I should give attention to. One is the overall objectives of NaLHISA as outlined in the program, setting up the Historians Network, and that deals with Objective 1 and Objective 3. Objective 1 sets as an intended outcome for this exercise practical questions leaning towards what my colleague has raised earlier on regarding issues of policy design, the architecture of NaLHISA's archive policy. So I had given a bit of time reflecting on what could possibly be one's intervention in that regard, of thinking alongside colleagues in informing that process of policy design and policy formulation. So that already lends itself in a technical sphere. It's not a theoretical sphere, but technical. But be that as it may, there are theoretical questions that arise from that exercise of design. So I think in us thinking forward, we are going to hit the ground running in terms of striking a balance between the technical imperatives of putting a policy together, which lands in a technical terrain, but also be mindful of the thinking that informs those decisions. So I think in trying to put my thoughts together, I'm gathering my thoughts in trying to strike a balance that a policy should be balanced in as far as it is able to maintain a kind of theoretical rigor while also being practical. So reflecting on that process, here are my thoughts. Objective 1 seeks to provide a platform for engagement on design of NaLHISA's archival policy. Objective 3 seeks to delineate priority areas for research on South Africa's liberation heritage. Now, the first objectives, as I've indicated, calls for a technical stance that involves a brief reflection on questions of design. Here, I want to think of a normal policy, a normal process of policy formulation. Reflecting on this aspect, I want to pause and ask, what is the intervention, policy intervention, that NaLHISA seeks to make in as far as its own articulation of what liberation heritage is? For that question would inform the kind of policy that we want to contribute towards. So for me, the very first question there is thinking carefully around, the conception of liberation heritage as that which animates the policy, rather than seeing these two running in different directions. But in the process of reflecting on what heritage is, that process, that thought process, informs the design of the policy. I don't know if you're with me here. So from time to time, I want to think of these two as running concurrently rather than as separate entities waiting to be put together in a document, but they feed on each other. So that is why it was crucial for me to read Objective 1 alongside Objective 3, for those two objectives talk to each other. So it is by maintaining that I think would help us in fine-tuning the policy guideline that my colleague was referring to. And so far, my thought processes immediately landed me to the space where I had to think about identifying legislative frames that support the architecture of an archival policy, possible laws that begin to feed into the process of designing the policy, because we already have those framework, those guidelines enshrined in the various laws that govern our society, being the first one being, of course, the Republic, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. What is it in the Republic, in the Constitution, that NaLHISA seeks to articulate? It's not everything there, but strategically being able to target, to make an impact on an aspect, on a constitutional requirement that our civil society should be galvanized, for instance, around public education that the previous speaker spoke about, that is of activating civic education. That is one. That is enshrined in the Constitution. There's also the National Heritage Resources Act, Act number 25 of 1995, which makes provision for identification, assessment, and preservation of the national heritage. Which aspects of that act can best inform our policy formulation? There's the Public Access to Information Act, there's Archives and Record Management, and there's a whole kind of list of acts that can help strengthen the policy in as far as it being, I'm happy my sister here on the legal side will be able, would have, of course, had a look on those. But those also frame our policy design. There's also an imperative for benchmarking, right? When we take this policy, are we able to benchmark it against some of the best practices nationally and internationally? So there are international standards on heritage preservation, policy guideline from the UNESCO Memory of the World project. That could be one inspiration to our policy formulation. Now, I've listed these here just to see them as not things that could only be incorporated, but as those areas that begin to open up, NaLHISA's intervention as to when we talk about the coming together of the different political parties now, in the now, what is it about the now that this intervention can best assist in advancing society and galvanizing and helping us refashion the visions that our forebears had initially established. Still thinking alongside the question of design, I am tempted to think of the need to reflect more carefully on NaLHISA's archives and records management plan. Mambaleka, you have traced the history of NaLHISA dating back to 2020. Now, when I think from 2020 to the present, NaLHISA would have accumulated notes and minutes, even if they are informal, those notes and minutes would constitute the very first exercise at developing an archives and records management plan. It is working with what you already have, right? So it's not something that's going to come at the end, at the tail end of the process, but it is that which develops organically in the process of reflecting, in the process of collating, in the process of developing proper archives and records management plan. It's something that's going to develop organically. It's going to reflect the nature of consultation. It's going to reflect the ideals, the values, the vision, the objectives. They are all there, but contained in kind of framing the various bases. All these are feeding into the policy. So in the process of doing the consultation, in the process of us gathering here, of course, these all constitute what would then form that initial archive of NaLHISA. NaLHISA accounting for its own existence, being able to develop its own archive organically. And already there, for a scholar of historiography, a scholar of history in post-apartheid South Africa would be able, 10 years down the line, to reflect on the process of NaLHISA's formulation, of NaLHISA's intervention in as far as pulling all these different segments of society together and refashioning the visions of liberation that initially ignited our forebears. So for me, the policy design, it's not an add-on to a process, but it should inform. It is part and parcel of what our volunteers, our leaders, and everybody is already engaged in taking practical steps towards informing that process. So I am happy really to reflect on this because it's work in progress. But of course, as a scholar of archives, and there has to be some kind of literature that comes into play, right? Though I hate doing that in gatherings of this nature, but it's important that when we think of people who have helped us to think on questions of archives, figures such as Stuart Hall, for example, he talks about the moment of archival constitution, you know, as that which forces us to pause, as that which forces us to take care in crafting and identifying those aspects of, you know, our society that we think are worthy of preservation. So for me, already there, when we begin to think alongside him in this process of NaLHISA's archival policy, we are not at fault, for we are already involved, but all what we need is just to take a step back and reflect on the process as we are engaged in consultations, as we are thinking about the different components of this very recharging exercise of conserving the liberation heritage. But there's something profound that I want to share from Hall's intervention regarding his thought around archives. He says, archives do not arise out of thin air. Each archive has a prehistory in the sense of prior conditions of its existence. So already, the previous speaker spoke about the history of resistance. So here we already have a sense of a pre-existence, the conditions of prior existence of the things that we want to take up as worthy of preservation. Constituting an archive represents a significant moment on which we need to reflect with care. The constitution of archives occurs when a random collection of work is at the point of becoming something more ordered and considered an object of reflection and debate. So for me, an archive is not somewhere there fixed and readily available to be retrieved and put under one roof. No, it is a process. It involves partly a process where a collection of works, visions, actions of different actors in society are in the process of constituting NaLHISA, becoming, on the verge of becoming something else. And that something else, right, requires our attention in terms of reflecting on it and debating. right? So it's returning back to those educational values of popular education that I was talking about, of opening up spaces for conversation in society. So it is an ongoing exercise of pause, reflect, and debate. Strategies for developing and growing an archive. I've already alluded to the fact that for NaLHISA already, there is readily available material in the minutes, in the notes that would have constituted the very beginning of the initiative and the consultations that went between the different actors. Now, this brings me to the second objective of the symposium, which is to delineate areas of strategic areas for research. I want to return back to this idea of this moment. For me, you know, there are two ways, and of course this could be a subject for discussion, right? There's one aspect of reflecting on what had happened in the past. There's also an aspect of thinking this moment. How do we begin to debate and reflect on the moment out of which NaLHISA emerged? So there's something about the now that requires our attention, which translates into a strategy, you know, to forming a strategy that would inform our consultations going forward. And I've already alluded to the presence of an active archive, because when you think of the minutes, the notes, that is an active archive. It's still growing. It is still developing. So it is being attentive to that active archive of NaLHISA. I'm being cautioned here, and I'm going to abide, really. In conclusion, I'm going to conclude. My concluding remarks on the design, which I think I had, my thoughts were really seeking to impact that process if I can. I'm trying my level best to get to that. That if we think of the design, the architecture of the policy for NaLHISA on archiving, right? What is it that we're doing? As I've alluded here, there are two parallel processes. There's the thinking and reflection, and also taking practical steps in gathering material to do with this moment of NaLHISA's archival constitution, which takes NaLHISA a step further away from the conception, but beginning a process of developing a preservation collection of archives. So for me, there's something about this moment which requires our attention in as far as activating and putting on wheels, more wheels, to this very exciting venture that has been presented, and an opportunity for other young scholars of archives to come on board and be part of this very exciting and promising venture that would help deepen scholarship and help us learn more about ourselves and also be better informed and responsible citizens. With those few words, I think I'm really want to add. Thank you.
Okay, we've been hearing input from various experts, and we should thank the experts for their input. Having noted that, I want to say Professor Landsberg and I are in the minority, not merely in terms of so-called race groups, but because of our names. If you just look at the program, you'll find that we've been having a preponderance of M's, and they're all not male. But it reflects the nature of our society and what alphabet is used. So we have had Motimele, we've had Mandla, we've had Maduma, we've had Mbulelo, we've had Moloka, and we've had the Honorable Mbete. So I want to, if you can, yeah. Just give it to them. Yeah, just give it to them. Just give it to them while I'm speaking. Okay. So can you give your stick? Okay. So while Dr. Ndlovu's stuff is getting connected, is there any burning comment? And I don't want the presenters and I don't want the experts in archiving or digitization to speak, but maybe some of the key political actors, and especially that element that we are clearly trying to engage and with emphasis on youth, because over 60% of our country's population comprise persons younger than 30, although the ANC and other political organizations use 35. So we'll be loose on that one. Any comment, short, crisp comment, while we get Dr. Ndlovu to come up? Yes, sir, please. Just quickly, just give your name and the comment. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Peter Steki. I come from Parliamentary Constituency Office in Katlewo. My only request, actually it's not a question, a request, that can we send these kind of activities to the public schools and also to the township areas. We are approaching September, which is a Heritage Month. These kind of lessons could be important to be learned by our children, so that we can make sure that they got love to history.
Okay.
I could say many things,
Sure.
but I thought this is important.
Yeah, now that's fine. Then right behind you, the young man, please. Yeah, you qualify.
Thank
Please,
you. Thank you very
short
much.
comment, crisp.
Yes. Max Ramasike. I am from the National Governors Association, which it's actually we do advocacy for parental involvement in education.
Sure.
And I'm seated here actually following from what he said. Majority of us that are here are adults. We don't have a lot of young people that are here. And I had an engagement with a professor during break, and I'm saying, how do we make this an attractive career for young people so that they can actually be able to know where they are, lest we then have a future that is being designed by other people outside South Africans.
Thank you. Now, when Her Excellency came and gave an overview of NaLHISA, one of the key entities created was this network of historians, okay? And the network of historians, it's part of the strategic outlook of NaLHISA, and it is for two purposes. Duplication was covered by Dr. Maduma. Some exist in different places. It is NaLHISA's job to, because of the contestation, each institution and entity is doing excellent work out there. It's NaLHISA's duty to connect the dots, to get the network of historians, and largely composed of academic historians, but also there are many others who are not regarded as historians, but are popular historians. And in this day and age, the third decade of the 21st century, when online journalism, if you like, is so rife, our duty is to mix that, right? Furthermore, it's no accident that we're talking about that history, because it is to infuse the school curriculum with that history, not the history of what was already referred to, the Fowler and Smith and Van Jaarsveld, but from the perspective of those who were here and not discovered. And it's significant that just over a month ago, I think it is, that the Catholic Church disavowed the doctrine of discovery. Right? So they didn't, this quest, that part of it was reflected here, that they discovered these places. And then you have the old, the new, and the third world, and other such emergences. That is to correct that. It links with the process of decolonialization, and importantly of the mind, and how we accept, and our institutions in the main. And I've been associated with this institution, and I can speak very fondly of its strides. I'm still associated with two other institutions, ironically, Stellenbosch and Pretoria. And they are attempts, but our institutions need nudging from the experts. And NaLHISA is well positioned to do that, if I may, because of its underpinning when it was created. So that's the role that I think NaLHISA is intending to play. I don't want to take the word out of the chairperson and the convener of NaLHISA. So that kind of approach is one that I think we need to be institutionalizing in as far as those policy imperatives becoming part of what is taken up. We have a remarkable opportunity, and I'm going to just pause myself here. A remarkable opportunity because we're already in election mode. An election has to be held within less than probably a year, although there's an outside chance it can go a little longer. Right. Now, nothing positions us for ensuring that some of these things happen than now. I wear different hats, and Freedom Park was mentioned. I also chair Robben Island Museum. And we've jointly declared these cultural institutions that was mentioned by Professor Maloka. We've declared the 2nd of February to the 11th of February, 10 days of liberation history. Because it's got a significance that we underestimate. Right? And I think Mandla Selwane covered it when he talked of the different manifestos. I'm just going to use that word, just only the manifestos. Because there are similarities. And it's a crying shame that on the 26th of last month, when the Freedom Charter ought to have been celebrated, that monument that is called the Walter Sisulu Square of Dedication. I discussed this with some of the family members. They didn't want it to be called after Kamela. They wanted it to remain Freedom Square or Freedom Charter, whatever, right? But the decay there, literal decay, is a state of where we've come to in our 29th year of democracy as we're going to the 30th. That's enough for my peroration. I see quite a few hands. We're going to open that up. I'm going to invite Dr. Ndlovu to give his input. Dr. Ndlovu.
Well, what I have in store here is the archive of Radio Freedom. So I was just going to play the first 5 minutes of that archive. which was digitized, but it's been held at Maibuye, at the University of Western Cape. And what I chose here as part of the archive was a program that was broadcasted every Sunday. It was called Voices of Freedom. And I have collected the interviews of President Tambo and also the former President Mbeki. So it's from the 1980s. It's different themes, it's different analysis of the situation as it occurred then. And from this recording, what I picked out as a historian for us now, if we want to know about our history, it was not only political history that was being recorded. It was also cultural history. It was cultural history because every interview was accompanied by song. And it was also military history because the opening is the AK-47, and then it simply means that's another type of history. That is military history. Then it means, therefore, you can't really, at the end of the day, think about the liberation movement and then you think it's only about political history. It's more than that. Both cultural history, gender history is crucial, is important, and also military history. So what we did from that archive, as scholars, we used that archives and we published a book which is called Guerrilla Radios. Okay, it's called Guerrilla Radios, and what we did, it's radios of all liberation movements in Southern Africa. It's the ANC Radio Freedom, we have Mozambique, we have Angola, we have Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe was divided into two. The two liberation movements had their own radio stations. And we also have the PAC radio here as part of the chapter. So the outputs are there from these archives that are digitized. This is the local version. This is the international version, which was published overseas. So we're gunning for both the Southern African market and also the overseas market so that people should know about our history. Yeah. No, they are not mine. One, I've borrowed one from the editor, Professor Sikiba Lechwati from Wits University, because I didn't have the international version. But for us, that was our strategy to make it a point that we're not parochial, we're not confined to South Africa. These have been reviewed. I mean, we've had positive reviews, even one from the University of Oxford, I think the politics department, so we then said, we planned correctly if some of the interviews are from overseas. And then also, the digitized archives of the ANC. What I did then was to go into the ANC letters by the former president, Thabo Mbeki. And the work that I'm doing now, we are going to publish a book out of those. And the book should be out by the end of this year. But when I listened to when I read one of those letters out of the digitized ANC archives, I was fascinated by a letter he wrote about Haiti. And actually there are 2 letters he wrote about Haiti. And including the fact that when Haiti celebrated its 200 years of its freedom, he was the only statesperson in the world who went there. He invited himself. So out of that, this is the main project that I'm doing, The Road to Democracy in South Africa. I published a book out of that, the ANC letters. You can have a look. This book, out of the inspiration of the ANC archive, this book, it's about celebrating Haiti. Can you pass through, because Mambalega, I want... They're coming. It's for you to understand Haiti. We kept teaching our children that yes, the first democratic countries in the world, it's either you go to the French Revolution, and then if not, you go and study the United States history and say, no, it's the Americans after the Civil War. No, it's not. It is Haiti. That's the first ever democratic country in the world. And Haiti is paying a price for actually doing that, And that was the main reason that the former president went to Haiti. So in this book, what I have done, I'm the chairperson of a ministerial tax team for the Department of Basic Education, which is about overhauling our school history curriculum. But I'm not going to discuss those issues now. But what I know, in that curriculum, they are punting the French through the French Revolution as the first country in the world to democratize. No, it is Haiti. So what we did in this book, our children are really cross with us as parents, because they say that they go into the history classroom. What they read about us as Africans, we are a defeated lot. We always on the run. There's nothing that they can claim that it is them. It is their ancestors who have achieved that. So what we decided to do in this book is to think about things through. Then Haiti is the first sort of focus area of study. The second focus area of study, which is also an embarrassment for us, is Anglo-Zulu War in PSS. Why? Precisely because King Cetshwayo defeated the British, who had just defeated who? The French. They defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. And then the British would claim, like Americans today, that it's where the sun never set, they are leading country in the world, but they couldn't explain why they were defeated by Africans, I imagine. So for our kids, for the first time, they will learn that they've done. So what was really surprising for me, the African Americans were celebrating King Cetshwayo. I had a specific chapter about that, for that victory. Actually, they even claim that the general who led Haiti in terms of defeating France, King Cetshwayo claims Louverture is the second Louverture in their life, Toussaint Louverture. So they see a continuation in that, and they even say that it does make sense because where was Napoleon banished? Napoleon was banished at St. Helena. And then King Cetshwayo's son, where is he banished for 10 years? At St. Helena. And then what happens to the heir of the throne from Napoleon? He was killed in KZN. He was killed in KZN. So what is surprising about us, in Isandlwana, you just have the hillock. Unlike Waterloo and the other places, they have heritage sites which are modernized. And there's a huge Anglo-Zulu war market which go and visit the battle site. The BBC, every December, every Christmas, they have films on the Anglo-Zulu war and Lancaster and whatever. And the Zulu Dawn and everything. But on our side, we've never done anything about it. But surprise, surprise, if you use the road to Durban, the old road, and when you are around Fryhead or whatever, you see a sign which tells you heritage site of a Prince Imperial. Who is that? It's Napoleon's nephew. You'll never find a heritage site dedicated to King Cetshwayo. How is his burial grave? No. The burial site is the worst you can see in the world. Then the third chapter of the book talks about Adwa. It now goes to Ethiopia, between the Italians and the Ethiopians. And we know that in 1895, the Ethiopians were victorious. So you have Haiti, you have Isandlwana, you have Adwa. So I'm sure our kids, really, if we teach them this history, it's not propaganda, it happened. It's just that the people who are responsible for this history are not proud of themselves. They can tell you more about what's happening in America than tell us more about what is happening in the continent itself and achievements of our people in the continent itself. So that's what I'm saying. You can use the digitized archives to come out with such works. And such works don't have to end up in paper publishing. You can make, for the kids themselves, the younger generation, using games. You can do, because they are into this stuff now, playing games and whatever, you can devise a game based on Haiti and how the battle was won, and reward them if they can answer specific questions which are academic and intellectual for them. As you know, the kids, when they play these games, for them to move to a higher stage, they have to answer questions and whatever. You can use the Anglo-Zulu War to do that. Whilst they move to the next stage, we are teaching more about the history of South Africa, that really at the end of the day, 1879 was a way towards to 1994. You don't limit the game to 1879 between the battle between the British and the Zulu, because it's not necessarily an ethnic thing. It's for South Africa, because that leads you to 1994. So the aim is for them at different levels, answering questions, they move to 1994. So as I said, I over-prepared here. I also had a presentation in mind about where are the digital archives in the world that told our history. For example, there's one at University of Michigan, there's one at Oxford. The one at Oxford is the history of the anti-apartheid movement. There's one that's called Digital Imaging South Africa, where each and every copy of Sichaba, each and every copy of the African Economist has been copied and it's available online. It doesn't matter. Even the first copy itself of the African Communist, the 1960s, it's there. It's been archived up until the law. And then there's one on International Institute for Social History, which is in the Netherlands. Everything that has to do with the struggle for national liberation as supported by International Solidarity Movement in the Netherlands. It's kept there. It is there. It is available. There's one in Sweden, that's Uppsala. So I'll just stop here. Apparently, I don't have time. But I was going to discuss all of them. The digital archives are there. It's up to us to access them, to use them, in order for our children to learn their own history. And as I was showing them, this is how we went about it in terms of the publications that we made. Okay, thank you. I hope my books won't disappear, so.
Thank you very much for that important contribution. It notes that all the presentations will be made available, so I don't think any of us should feel we are not being given the full benefit. If you can, yeah, if you could. Okay. I believe we have Dr. Vuyani Boy here. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow for interaction. The technical questions, I think, should be addressed to the specialists outside of here. Let's have a discussion on what has transpired thus far from the opening welcome from Deputy President, Mbete, to our last input person, Professor Ndlovu, and the context. Importantly, the last speaker raised certain issues about, I'm not going to repeat what he's saying. The nexus with what Mandla Selwane pointed out of context and contextualizing history is being brought together in a necessary way so that we don't only limit it to pre-discovery, in inverted commas, right? 15th century chattel slavery that the Portuguese perfected and which the British formally ended in the 1830s with the decree of stop and search. The role of that here, the linkage with what is Africa when Haiti, 22nd of August 1791 is that date, okay? And its celebration of 200 years of being the first African republic in the modern era. I remember TM in 2003 talking about going to Haiti. Haiti. The locals call it Haiti, without the H. And its linkage to the state of our countries and the African condition. And I want to point this out, that science tells us up to 96%, 94 to 96% of the world's population can trace their origin to the oldest ethnic group in the world, the Komani San, in the southern Kalahari, bordering South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. And the rest is our history. Only maximum 5% can trace a different strain to Homo sapiens. Given all that, and this San Juana date, and then the Congress of Berlin, by these powers, including some of the names you've mentioned now, where the repositories are. And that debate about returning one of our, the persons who was in a museum somewhere else. So there's a linkage. Enough from me. Over to you. Comments, crisp as possible, and questions so that we can have an interaction. Mfwethu, you had your hand up before. So we'll take you, then come down to you. Number 3. 1, 2, 3. Please pass the mics. Okay, if you can.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Pass the mic, please.
My name is Gordon Zide. I'm a senior citizen. I want to thank the former president for setting the tone, because in her approach, she explicitly explained the connectivity and the connection between spirituality and us as human beings, not necessarily from any racial point of view. Her mentioning of Kayakulu, I think it is something that as human beings we should really embrace. But I was also particularly impressed by Mandra's presentation. I mean, he really took us down the memory lane, those of us who were in SASO and Black Consciousness, and I'm happy that the presentations would be made available. So it was really very interesting. But finally, Tozama made mention of a number of initiatives at the University of Fort Hare. But what is outstanding for me is whether or not NaLHISA is making any endeavors or attempts of getting hold of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe's voice in the archives. Because sometimes it becomes very, very painful. I mean, those of us who have been very fortunate to have met with him can still hear his baritone. But those that come behind us have absolutely no idea. So this is something that I'm throwing to the House for discussion.
Okay. When Mfwethu. You've got the mic? Yeah.
Salutation to the House at large. I must say, for the first time,
Ikamala.
my name is Sizwe Mkhwanazi. I'm a delegate of the Youth Sector Parliament in the Commission 4, where we are discussing the mental illness that is affected by the youth unemployment. It is such a great honor to be under such spaces of educated people, like old people. You guys are educated, all of you, and here's me without a degree or anything like that. I put a blame to the UJ facility to that for rejecting my space, for not paying up. But beside that, I was just getting that personal vendetta out of the space.
Sure. Let it out. Right.
This is so amazing. I so wish that youth would have participated into this. Somebody just raised that to say that it's not of a most of youth that is attending. I think it's because of how it's been presented. Most of us are really shy at such spaces like this because of, the inequality and how we need to behave.
Sure.
I'll take off my hat to say my presentation, but likely I'm the only one who's wearing a handcrafted hat. I can see you guys are new fashions. Yes, speaking of the syllabus at high schools, you spoke of that, which raised my interest. I think where our heritage has been lost the most, or maybe the facility that is killing our heritage and culture the most, are currently the high schools. We lack information or lack historical heritage from home, and then when you get to institution, to hope that they will teach us something closer to what we were supposed to be celebrating as our heritage, and then they divert. And now the syllabus, it leaving the art and culture at grade 9, and then now we have LO that has been prolonging from grade 1 up until grade 12, only to find out that it doesn't add on AP scores when it comes to university entries. I feel like the initiative here would get to high schools and now reconduct the syllabus. Let us have the arts and culture being embraced so that our mothers as well would know of our skills and art that we have, so that they would know of the new cultures that we already introduced. Because yes, we are not being politically affiliated because of we don't engage to anything that relates to us. But if we could now go back to high schools, encourage their art and culture, then that is the only way we could get them closer to now telling on their new culture, so we can have facilities that will prolong and give this information from one generation to the next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Program Director. My name is Reverend Alfred Mahapa. I'm the CEO of Mangope Foundation. I'm so delighted to be here and to thank also NaLHISA in collaboration with the University of Johannesburg for inviting us also here. I supported, or I liked what Ndate Mandla said when he talked about the revisiting history. From where I come from, I know most of you, if I talk about Mangope, then you become skeptic about that name. How does he fit in as far as liberation is concerned? So I was once working at the National Heritage Project, where I once proposed that people like the legend like Mangope, President Mangope of Bophuthatswana, should be placed also in the procession of liberators from 1652, the time when John van Riebeeck comes into South Africa. And they said, no, he is part of the puppet. He's one of the puppet of the apartheid regime government. So, but I want to provoke the NaLHISA today that they should also look at involving in the history, because I can say history without Mangope, it will be incomplete, because he also liberated South Africa. In particularly, I grew up in Bophuthatswana. I'm the product of that, because there was restrictions that there was restriction on education, restrictions on industries for him, but he managed through the infrastructures and everything that today government is using in all the areas. So he liberated most of the people. So what I'm saying on behalf of the foundation is that we will be happy to see NaLHISA taking forward our proposal that look unto it that also Mangope become part of the history, because we cannot say he never existed, because we want even the young generation of today to know about him, because the Northwest government is using his buildings, the Parliament of the Northwest was also his buildings, going down to the
Thank
Northern
you, Reverend.
Cape.
You're repeating yourself. NaLHISA's mandate is very specific. Re Mangope will go down in history and is in history already. The mandate of NaLHISA is to talk about what objectively and subjectively we know as the liberation era, which does include Re Mangope. The debate will be on which side. But the point is that Re Mangope will go down in history. As we speak here, His Excellency Mangosuthu Buthelezi is in hospital. And he has a particular role in our history. So this effort is not to the exclusion of anybody, but it is about affirmation of all of us through the liberatory period, liberating our minds grounding ourselves spiritually. And I want to point out that the World Health Organization's definition of health, importantly, includes not only bodily, somatic, psychological, but also spiritual health. So that is the context in which we are. 3 more comments, please. I note some people in the back there. If are there, yeah, Ntate Dlamini, if you want to. Yes. Yeah, come in, please. If you can go to the back, I think. Yeah. Please.
Let me start by saying, apologizing. If I say something wrong, I was born with disability. The speech and pronunciation is a problem. They say in my language, kubamba ezingelayo. Again, they say, izinja zikhonkotha imoto ehambayo. Uba ihambe, uba le moto ihambe. It simply means if the vehicle is not moving, dogs and chicken find the shade. And so my criticism shows that something is being done, the vehicle is moving. So don't interpret it to be against this effort. When I was young, I was a prophet and a muti man, or muti boy, during the struggle of Poco. So I did that effectively, contributing to the family effort and the family contributing to the liberation struggle. Now, what I learned as a young boy, that those who have knowledge and education must not only keep that knowledge to themselves, it must filter down to the masses. And I benefited from that. Now, the problem today is that intellectuals, scholars, academics, they argue amongst themselves. And they don't filter down to the masses. That's problem number 1. Number 2, academics and scholars and intellectuals, they will criticize the liberation movement failure. They don't point to themselves that they failed. Now, what I'm trying to say, I've heard all the speakers. Really, they have it. But I've not heard a single speaker going down to say, while we are busy with this effort, how do we take it down to the masses? This is a very good initiative. This is supported. But remember, the biggest part of the liberation struggle was done by the masses themselves. You refer to the trade unions, the workers, you refer to the township that made the whole thing ungovernable. Now, that history, you need to sell NaLHISA to the masses of our people, so that they understand their history before you even talk about children at school. If I don't understand, how will I tell my granddaughter and grandson that this is correct? I benefited from decolonized education, and I've tested my education that I got from my seniors, my leaders, and I went to the university with Standard 6. And I was testing what the liberation movement taught me, and I succeeded. So the same way we should work in such a way that in the process, while doing this, have a program that will start going down. I was happy to hear my colleague behind me saying that I don't have education. That's what the liberation movement have been doing. It's our education that we learn from it, and we need to continue with that program because it has been tested and found to be good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.